fresh perspective to you on all things related to how humans develop their individual brilliance while navigating the excitement, stickiness, and resistance in their relationships. In my 40 years of working as a psychotherapist, I have been continually amazed at the ways in which people overcome challenges. I hope to share my experience and insights with you today and to stimulate your thinking. So today I'm in Seattle, where my oldest son and my daughter-in-law are packing up their house to move to Vermont. This is one of the most stressful events that families experience. Someday in the future, I will talk about the geography of the multi-generational family, where families members live in relationship to each other, patterns of mobility, and how and when they move, either closer to each other or farther away. This is a topic that has fascinated me since I began to study my own family. However, not today in the midst of moving boxes. Today, I want to talk about marital therapy. I'm going to use the example of the celebrity divorce I discussed last month, Wang and Jinglui. I will review the timeline of the couple's relationship through the divorce proceedings. Then I will describe how I would analyze the strengths and challenges in the relationship between Mr. Ham and Ms. Jinglui. This assessment includes what is known about their families of origin. I use a celebrity relationship because I have no relationship with either spouse, their family members, or any of their therapists. The facts I present are grounded in broad public knowledge. My goal is to offer a calm and balanced perspective on the life of this family. In my practice, I aim to be as neutral as possible, both in my thoughts and interactions with the couple. The importance of this is how our interconnectedness, and I think many members of my audience will understand and know that even the smallest, most insignificant event can have far-reaching effects. And because of this, I'm very conscientious about what I say, especially what I speak into a public arena about another. I've chosen a couple that's unknown to me who are celebrities in another country and culture. There's enough information about the couple, and because their divorce was let me say, sort of a social media event, there is a certain quality of information from that. There's information about their families because of the celebritydom. So there's enough information for me to begin to think about how this couple has functioned and what might have been useful to them. Now, I've chosen a couple unknown to me because it gives me a greater neutrality. And the fact that they're celebrities makes the information available, but they're also from another country and culture. And I just want to acknowledge that there are also, I think, sometimes there's translation from people who come from other parts of the world that's important to just be aware of. I don't think it has a big impact on how I think and on the basic principles that I use. However, I have had the advantage of learning about this couple through colleagues of mine from that culture. And they have been able to alert me to important values in the community and in the culture that could have an impact on the dynamics I'll be discussing. So I will also only be presenting details that I believe are essential to providing an illustration of the principles of marital therapy that guide me as a therapist. There's, in this particular case, and often there are many other details that others find interesting and dramatic. And they're sometimes on the level of gossip. In this couple, there was what I would call bad behavior was one of the features in the divorce that can attract a lot of attention. My attitude toward bad behavior is that it's another symptom in the family. I don't think there's anything particular special about one type of bad behavior versus another. In this case, there were accusations of marital infidelities. And this people can get very reactionary to this. I can think of many other types of bad behavior. And my goal is to just stay as neutral about that as possible. It's a feature, it's important, it affects people, but so do many other symptoms, whether they're depression or psychosis or addiction or cancer or a chronic illness. These things always affect people in the family. So that's just how I see bad behavior. Just another element that it will affect how things happen in a family and in a couple. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to talk a little bit about the history of this relationship, sort of their story, and then I'll begin to sort of give you some information about how I would get a bigger picture and try to understand this. So Wang Liham, just to say I'll get more into his background when I talk about kind of my assessment, but he is a sort of celebrated musician who was raised in the United States, began his career in college. During college, was picked up by recording labels I believe in Taiwan, and quickly became a sort of a phenomenon in Asia, in China, in Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Very talented musician, very creative. After graduating from college in the United States with honors, he then went to the Berklee School of Music, where he continued his education and all along the time continued his career in music and developing this very large fan base of millions of fans. So that's his background. When he was 26, he was in Taiwan and he met Jinglui, who was a 16-year-old. I don't know much about that or their circumstances, but they quickly became involved. However, it wasn't what would you say, a committed relationship. My understanding was he was still dating other people. She was 16. And when they married 10 years later in 2013. And in those 10 years, she left Taiwan, came to the United States, went to a prestigious university. I think I heard that one person said that she went to Princeton University. And then she also then got an MBA at Columbia. So during those 10 years, they were dating off and on. And they were a couple. He was seeing other people, but it was, and there were also, I think later, they said there were reports that he had, was seen with prostitutes. So during this time, they were developing their relationship. There was a 10-year difference between them. She was they were both pursuing their own career goals, and they somehow held together through all of that, right? Including the reports of bad behavior. So they married in 2013, and at the time of their marriage, Li Jinglui was pregnant. And his family which we'll get to discuss later, objected to the marriage. She insisted that the pregnancy was planned, that Wang Liham had wanted a child, so that this was not an accidental. She later said that she was forced to sign prenuptial papers, prenuptial agreement, and then they did marry. Soon after that, they started seeing a therapist. So, one of the questions that I think myself and my, colleagues would raise, well, how would you approach marital therapy with a young couple in this situation? And I'm not sure where they were living at that time. I think that would be important. Were they in the United States, or was she back in Taiwan? So at the time of their divorce, she was living with her children in Taiwan. So I think that's an interesting question, because it would also give some idea of her proximity to her family and his proximity to his family. What I also don't have in the timeline is that any significant particular events that I think would be important about the development of his career. My understanding is that when they married, she began to stay home with the children. At some point in their marriage, he wanted her more involved in his business. His mother had been running his business, really with a very tight rope, you might say. He was, given an allowance of money to spend. Even though he was generating wealth, he was not really able to make decisions about that. And he wanted his wife more involved at a particular point in the marriage. I think in the end that did not go very well. Particularly, I think that the indications are that the mother was also still quite involved and wanted to stay involved. So before the reports are that Wang Liham asked for a divorce 2 years after they were married. And at that time, Li Jinglui then became pregnant with their second child. And that event, as is common, sort of put off any talk of divorce. In August of 2019, so this is 6 years after they married, they separated. And during this time, paparazzi had, published pictures of him with other women. So they separated 5 years and 8 months after they married. And in December, so 3 months or 4 months later, during that time, they were negotiating terms of the settlement. And Wang's family insisted that Li Jinglui leave the property that had been the marital property, as she'd agreed to before the marriage. And on December 15th, Wang announced his divorce to his fans over social media. Now, Wang had developed an image as a clean family man, husband and family man, as part of his sort of celebrity image. So announcing the divorce over social media was a shock to his fans. 2 days later, Li Jinglui wrote a 5,000-word letter on social media in which she made really brutal accusations of her husband, accused him of infidelity, soliciting prostitutes, and she also disparaged his family, describing them as suspicious, bullying, abusive, and being what she called cold violence toward her. And then over the ensuing 3 days, there was a volley of social media back and forth between Li Jinglui, Wang, and his father, who entered the fray to defend his son, and accusing his daughter-in-law of coercing Wang Liham into the marriage. This all in public on social media. This, what we call dirty laundry, is put out there. But Li Jinglui quite deftly replied to her father's accusations. The general public response was more favorable toward her than toward Wang Liham and his family. Wang was considered weak in that his father was the one who came to his defense. Wang accused her of being mentally unstable. This went back and forth. Okay. Over a period of, let's see, over a week. And then in the course of that week, Wang apologized on social media, said he was going to quit the entertainment business for the time being, would transfer the house to her and pay the support for the children. And then she backed down and said she wouldn't sue him. And then she explained why she had taken this public, because she wanted to, sort of force Wang Liham to act in a more honorable way. So this all transpired at the end of 2021. So, as you can imagine, the talk still goes back and forth about this. So that is a brief outline of the events in this marriage. It's now time for a break. This is Mercy Russell of the Remarkable Relationship Show. Today I'm talking about marital therapy in the context of a celebrity marriage, and a lot of drama. We'll be
Chris Domine is a husband, father, an athlete, even an Ironman. But 10 years ago, Chris's kidneys were failing.
The doctor said, if you don't get a kidney transplant, you are going to die.
Chris received a second chance, made possible by an organ donor.
Your well-being changes from loss of hope to better times ahead.
What could you make possible as an organ, eye, and tissue donor? Leave behind the gift of life. Go to organdonor.gov, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration.
Have something important to say? Want to help improve our world? Need to promote your business uniquely and effectively? KKNW is the answer. Our staff helps broadcasters and podcasters create professional sounding audio. Bring your talent and let our experts help you craft a radio show or podcast that best delivers your message. Learn more at 1150kknw.com. That's 1150kknw.com. KKNW, talk variety that's live and local. Bringing good vibes to the Puget Sound and the world. Alternative Talk 1150.
Morning, this is Mercy Russell of the Remarkable Relationship Show. Today I'm talking about marital therapy, and I'm talking about it in the context of the story of Wang Liham and Li Jinglui. These are a celebrity couple from who are celebrities in China, in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, whose divorce has been sort of splayed all over social media. And I've been talking about this today in order to demonstrate some of the ways that I think about marital therapy. So I just gave a timeline of the history of the relationship between Wang Liham and Li Jinglui. and then the events around their divorce. So now I'm going to just start to just sort of talk out loud about the way that I would think about beginning to understand what has happened with this couple, as if I were going to work with them or as if they were consulting with me. Now, at different points in their relationship, they did consult therapists. I think they went as a couple. I suspect that after the separation and since then, that they may have seen individual therapists. They might have seen individual therapists in the course of their marriage. This is not uncommon either. Fortunately, we have no facts about that, other than that Li Jinglui has talked about how a therapist diagnosed her husband, right? That alone tells you that there's, in a sense, a lack of neutrality, right? That, and she's using this as a public weapon, but I think it's just important to say that when a therapist tells one member of a couple what's wrong with the other one, that there's some neutrality lost there. And I think neutrality is really one of the greatest gifts that a therapist can bring to a couple or to a situation. And as I think mentioned before, it's particularly important and more challenging often for the therapist when one of the problems in the marriage is what I call bad behavior, right? When one person is symptomatic, because it brings up a lot of sort of moral indignation. Now, if Wang Li Ham had contracted, ALS or a cancer, or had a horrible disfiguring accident, that kind of thing, had something physical, or, had a severe depression, these kinds of symptoms would have similar, very important effects on the marriage, but would not be, it would be easier to be neutral about them, to not judge a person on the basis of them. So that's my goal with bad behavior. At any rate, so now what I'm going to talk about is just sort of how I would begin to think about working with a couple. So the question I really come with is, how can my knowledge and use of a systems view provide a ballast or a balancing or a grounding to a family? That's really my goal. And my initial way of thinking about, I think, a situation is really important, because that's what's going to guide what I'm going to say, who I'm going to be with that couple. I think, contrary to many mainstream therapists, certainly do my best to maintain rapport and to communicate effectively to the different people that I work with. And that requires, different language, different strategies. However, I think it's the way that I think, the theoretical basis and my awareness of it gives me something to stand on when I'm working with a couple. So rather than be guided by what they say they want, right, I can relate to them on the basis of what I know. They can take it or leave it, right? But what I know from my own experience and my own observations and the experience of others, what I know to be helpful. So again, we generally maintain a high degree of confidentiality in this situation. I think it's really important. I would be with a celebrity couple very conscientious, of course, of confidentiality, because of the impact that the couple is already experiencing with this with this very close popular eye, with people paying attention to them and developing opinions about them, never mind expressing them on social media. And this is the basic principle here, is that one of the, I think, the driving forces in when couples are having problems in their relationships is anxiety, both the anxiety they're feeling and experiencing, and then a deep, more what I would call chronic anxiety, or more deep-seated anxieties that come down through generations in the family. Another factor is anxiety that's in the culture, right? And so this is, and the anxiety travels very quickly through human groups, and it can take different forms. Get the helpfulness, concern, admiration, and encouragement can all bring a zizz to a relationship. So it's fairly important to be aware of what you're bringing, and when you discuss someone else's situation. So many details will be omitted, will be left out, except for those that are really pertinent to the assessment. So when there's been a critical event in the family, the intensity of the emotional reaction to that event, whether it's a birth, a death, a divorce, a public crisis, a bankruptcy, the strength of the emotional reaction or the storm is governed by how well integrated the family is at the time, or by how important that person is in the family. So that's, I think it's important to note that the same event can happen in two families, and one can be a tidal wave and the other one can be just sort of an episode of stormy weather, right? And the kind of events that can upset a family, and that I would start to look at if I were, if I had the opportunity to take a deeper view of this marriage. Events which can disturb the equilibrium are the birth of a child. And the birth of each child can bring its own wobble, you might say, in the families, and sometimes positive and sometimes upsetting. Even a positive birth can disturb the equilibrium, right? So the event itself can be positive, but the lack of balance is what can get upset. That's why it's important to look at these events, regardless of whether they're considered positive or negative. So what you might call physical changes in the family. A child leaves home for education or work or marriage. Again, these can be accomplishments on the part of the child, but it can change very much the balance of how people are relating to each other. Likewise, the death of a significant family member, even if that person is, 105, right? So that it's not a tragic death, but it's an expected death after a long-lived life. When a significant member, leaves the family through death, that can upset the balance. Losses of important functions, someone becomes disabled or retires. We often see, marriages that kind of go into some kind of crisis around retirement. And then when a member is either a leader in the family or maybe a very lighthearted person that always sort of calms everybody down, and that person, that child goes to college, right? And the family has lost something that, kind of keeps things even keel. When there are deaths in the family, there can be an emotional, what we call a shock wave that can ripple through the families. The death of the older brother of a father who is an important person in the family can affect a niece or a nephew. Those shock waves can go through. So that's why the timelines of all these events in the multi-generational family are really important, because you can sometimes see the pairing of problems in one part of the family that are actually linked to things that happen in another part of the family. And usually what happens in this case is it's not seen, right? Until you actually take this bigger bird's eye view. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense that that the death of an uncle I barely knew could, impact my marriage. It doesn't really make sense to me. Or that the fact that my sister all of a sudden becomes becomes elected into an important office. Everyone's very proud of her. It's a very happy thing for the family, but it can upset the balance, right? How could that be then related to, her child's drop in grades, even though, you know what I mean? Sometimes you can, sort of try to see a direct effect, but often it's an indirect effect and it's invisible to the family. So what do I look at when I'm going to show you a family diagram that I use, but in the course of building that family diagram, I'm collecting the kinds of facts that will begin to give me a picture of sort of how well integrated how stable this family is, how well built is the house of this family, how strong is the foundation, how strong are the joists, how tight are the windows. That's how I think about it. So I would look at births, death, the dates of births, deaths, marriages, separations, and divorces. I would look at how many there are, where they are in the family, when they happened. Same with any deaths. I would look at deaths that are considered natural, or those that are premature or accidental. And I would look at if there's an unanticipated death, was there something that preceded that? If I'm looking at a couple who's coming in for marital therapy, I'd want to look at other marriages in the family. For example, over the course of generations, the kinds of marriages among aunts and uncles and grandparents and cousins. How long were the marriages? How many separations or divorces? And in what part of the family, right? In the mother's family, in my mother's family, or my father's family, in the mother's or the father's. And then if there are divorces, what kind of contact? What was the nature of that divorce? What is the contact with former spouses in that divorce? So I'd be looking at the quality of other marital relationships based on facts that could be documented, not on so much the emotional content of it, but just facts of the stability. And then when there's an unanticipated death, were there other things that happened in the family? Cutoffs, a child disappears or decides they don't want to talk to their family anymore, or their parents. And this happens sometimes, that people will just kind of cut off for 5 years, maybe not permanently, but that can be very upsetting in the family. Or they move to another country, right? But they don't stay in touch. Divorces and illness. So that's another thing that's important to look at, is episodes of illness in other parts of the family. And then when there's symptoms that come up in a family, again, because of this idea that anxiety travels through the family, that it can be a shock wave, I look at this not just in the couple coming to me, but I'd be talking to them about these events in their broader family. This can be very challenging for a couple, for members of a couple, to think that their difficulty in their sex life with their spouse has any relationship to Uncle John and his diagnosis of cancer, right? But when you look at the timeline, you can see sometimes a real, almost precise pairing of some of these, of an event such as that. So just with that in mind, I would want to look at the kinds of symptoms that come up in a family, and how do they progress over time? Because some symptoms will come up and they're chronic. They are there for a lifetime, right? Someone gets a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, and they have symptoms of, that go along with that disease. And then there are others where the symptoms might come and go. There might be accidental physical events. And that has a different nature than something that is a chronic illness, or something like cancer that comes, is treated, and then recedes into remission. There are also social symptoms, addictions, legal, financial problems. Look at those. How did those, were they resolved, or did they continue? Same with emotional symptoms, depression, anxiety, psychosis. So that's the beginning of how I would begin to look at the assessment of the funds in the family. And I'll return with that after the break. This is Mercy Russell with the Remarkable Relationship.
Do you make a positive difference in the world? Do you have a talent, philosophy, base of knowledge, product or service that you know could help a lot of people if only you could reach them? Join Alternative Talk 1150's family of broadcasters and start walking down a fruitful path. As host of your very own program, dial 425-653-1150 and find out just how affordable it can be to have a show on 1150 AM. That's 425-653-1150. Alternative Talk, we have an opportunity waiting just for you.
Hi, tune into my new show, The Remarkable Relationship Show, with me, Mercy Russell. I bring a fresh perspective on all things related to how humans develop their individual brilliance while navigating the excitement, stickiness, and resistance in their relationships. Wednesdays from 9 to 10 a.m. And you can visit my website at leadershipwithmercy.com.
You found us. Maybe you've been guided to listen. Alternative Talk 1150.
Good morning. This is Mercy Russell with the Remarkable Relationship Show. Today, I just want to mention again that I'm in my son's home in Seattle. He's preparing to move across the country with his family. And I'm here. I'm actually recording this session. My family's waking up. So you may hear some movement around with his young daughter and his wife. So anyway, I'm continuing today to talk about I really wanted to talk about marital therapy and how I would approach it and some of the assumptions that I would make. Again, this is just one approach to marital therapy. There are many valid, useful ways in which therapists can help couples who are struggling in their marriages. And this is just a sort of a different view and the way that I would work. So I discussed the timeline of the marriage. We're talking about Wang Ham and Jinglui. I spoke about them in a previous episode. Wang Ham has been a celebrity with a huge musical and entertainment career, acting career in China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. He and his wife had a divorce at the end of 2021 that was splashed all over social media, in which there were many accusations of bad behavior. And that's what we're talking about today. They saw therapists throughout their marriage. And so part of the question is, how would you think about this kind of situation how would I think about it as a marital therapist? So Anyway, so I'm going to continue now. So I've just been talking about sort of the kinds of variables I would look at in the multi-generational family. But now I'm going to share with you, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you a family diagram. This is what I call my tea leaves. And this is the kind of information about this family that I would find important and useful. So when I work with a couple or either individual from this couple who are coming in with concern about their marriage, I would build this picture of the family over the first few sessions. I would collect the kinds of facts I was just talking about. I would put them as notes in the diagram to give me an idea of the timeline. This diagram you're watching, basically, it actually comes from a family diagram app that was developed by Patrick Stinson, and that's Stinson. And in this, he has a feature in which you can build a timeline. And that's fair, of all these events. And you can see if there are events that are clustered visually, you can see that. So because this is an important way of thinking from a systems perspective. So just briefly for this particular family, to talk a little bit more about what the dynamics are and what the issues are and how I think about them. At the very bottom there's a circle and a square that's a double circle and a double square, and that's Wang Liham and his wife. And what you can see is we have a lot more information about Wang Liham than we do about Li Jinglui and her family. That alone tells you a lot, right? Just that the information, that his family information is so available in many ways because of their own accomplishments and their position in society. Li Jinglui's family, all we have is information about her parents. Does that mean her family doesn't have social status? No, but it is not talked about, obviously. So just this alone tells you who the heavy is in the family. And Wang Liham's family, I would say, not only we can see the details of the effect on him, but you can also see that it was probably a feature in the marriage, the importance of his family and the weight of it versus hers. And this would be, and if I'm coaching a couple, I would have them look at that and begin to think about how they could relate to that family in a different way, to be the kind of people that they want to be, to have the marriage they want. I would be talking to Lee about how she relates to this family, where she could find people who she could talk to, who she could have a kind of a calm relationship with, how she could develop communication with the important people in the family. Likewise, I would have him talk about how he relates to her family and to her parents and to the people who are important in her life, right? And remember, he met her when he was 16. So these people were in her life. He knows them. How is he relating to them, right? These are, I think, really important features in terms of how a couple can stabilize itself, particularly in this public eye. So, but I just want to mention a few details about Wang Liham. So if you look at the very top row, you'll see it's actually above him, you see his father. That square is a male and round is female, right? This is just part of our code, my little, ways that we signify this. Doesn't mean anything in particular. But the square, so you can see that important person in the top row is in his father's family, right? Well, that was a grandfather. One of the important events in families are immigrations. When a family, I say, crosses the ocean, right? Not only moves maybe to a different part of the country, but moves from one country to another. And part of what you look at is what motivated that. Sometimes, and very often, it's not a calm move. It's done because of the need to find a better life. It's because one has to leave. In this case, Wang Liham's grandfather had been part of the Cultural Revolution in China, but was a member of the Chinese National Party, which was, in a sense, lost in the competition for dominance to the China Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party. And as a result, as a important person in that Chinese Nationalist Party, he had to leave the country. So he left China and went to Taiwan. So it wasn't a formal exile, but it certainly had the punch of that. And so this family leaves a country in which they have a lot of social status, and they enter a new country. Now, if you look at the details, you'll see that this family has many professionals in it and a very accomplished people. There are people there who aren't accomplished. We don't have so much information about them, but what we know is that there's quite a bit of family pride. The other thing, Wang Liham's parents themselves emigrated from Taiwan to the United States as young professionals to advance their careers. And Wang Liham was raised in the United States. So even though he's a celebrity in China and in Asia, he was raised as an American, and he's not known in America. So this gives you quite a bit of information about just what this couple is up against. And what you can see is that there are these very positive events, these immigrations that brought safety to the family. His parents came here to advance their careers and were successful in it. Their children were well educated at fine educational institutions in the United States. This all sounds very good, but underlying it, there is a natural anxiety in this type of movement, even if the events are positive and are desired by their participants. There's a disruption in the balance of the family when this whole family leaves in one country for another. And that we see that with Li Jinglui, right? She grew up in China, and then she moved to the United States, where she was educated on her own. I mean, she's not, as far as we know, she's not coming from a family that's supporting her in all of this. And then after she marries, she returns to Taiwan. And then what did that grounding in Taiwan, was that positive for her? Was that another strain? Who was her support there? That's the kinds of things you would want to start to think about. So at any rate, this diagram, again, I call it my tea leaves, and I'm going to just go back and talk a little bit more about how would you think about what a couple like this could gain from therapy. So the important thing, there's some assumptions that I would make. One is that there are unusual aspects of this family experience, right? Because of the celebrity nature of the husband. That's had an impact on his family, and it's certainly always been a feature in the marriage. However, it's so easy to be distracted by those special features and overlook that there are very basic principles of emotional process in the family that are at work in any family, and that these kind of special or glittery or gossipy events are simply facts in the family. They don't in terms of what actually is emotionally happening between people, they are details, but they're not essential to the basic principles. So when there's this, I would say that there was an extreme event in that not only did this couple divorce after 20 years of being in relationship, but they blasted it in a very inflammatory way over social media. That in itself, I would say, is the really critical event here, is that the way this marriage dissolved involved one member making a decision to air all the dirty laundry in public, and social opinion then impacted the family members and what they did. So one way of thinking about this is that, okay, the wife made this decision and then she caused all of this reaction. But another way of thinking about it is both her immediate decision, what happened in the week or two following that, in the volley of exchanges between her and Wang Liham and his family, that in a way, a lot of that is predictable by pre-existing patterns in the family. Now, the longer term outcome of this, both for this couple and their children, can also be somewhat predicted by patterns of family resiliency in prior generations and their ability to adapt, right, to extreme events. So I don't know about Lee's family, so it's not so easy to know how she will fare. Will she maintain this public image? She's become quite well known. There's, I think there's Team Lee and Team Wang, right? Like we had with, our American drama of Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. But so she now has a public presence that's much more prominent in a way than what she had before. So how will that bear out over time? Well, if I were working with her, or if I were working with Wang, I could make some predictions. You can see the resiliency and adaptability in his family. Even though some of their behavior was met with quite a bit of disapproval, the likelihood is he's going to be okay. Will his children be okay? Now, another assumption is that one significant family member can keep that boat afloat. Now, it might be the mother. It might be Wang's mother, right? Or could keep the boat, tipping. So it could be a member of the couple. It could be somebody else in the family who, with the right guidance, could help to settle the water, so to speak. These critical events often turn out to be really rich opportunities for individuals to make decisions for themselves in a way that can really improve their relationships with the family over time. Sometimes it's harder when things are very calm to actually make a difference or to get the attention of the emotional system and of the family. However, these times, I think, with a long-term view in mind and good principles for moving forward, can lead to greater tolerance for expression of individual thoughts and emotions by all family members. And if a couple comes to me like this, I'm thinking about how vulnerable is this family to symptoms in the future, in the shockwave of this particular event. So this explosion into social media with all these accusations and this public fighting, what kind of impact will that have on the children over time, right? Will there be a shockwave and that will produce problems or symptoms later on? And it can be symptoms, it can be emotional cutoff. What's history in the family with open communication about difficult topics? How much fluctuation has there been in prior functioning of individuals? We don't have much information about that, between the brothers and the sisters, how did they fare? That's why you need this very careful family history of events. And the fundamental question is, who is the natural leader? And I really believe that the natural leader can really provide the greatest balance. So the important thing about systems theory is that it'll keep the focus on the stability of the large family over time in the context of this upsetting event. So you can work with individuals to sort of find their best course through not only what happened, but then when things settle down, how things are going to play out over time. And then you look at relationships and the multi-generational as a potential resource, right? So not just a cause of problems, but who in that family can be a resource. For example, Wang Ham has a close relationship with his younger brother. Can that younger brother and his family provide Wang Ham with a more balanced, calm, safe haven to kind of recover and regroup from not only what's happened in his marriage, but the explosion in social media. And so I think that I've probably said enough. That's really how I would begin to think about what I could offer a family who's going through an intense situation. This is Mercy Russell with the Remarkable Relationship Show, and I have, used this hour to talk more about marriage and marital therapy in a dramatic situation. And I've been using the celebrity divorce of Wang Ham and Jinglui to illustrate the kinds of principles that would guide a systems view. It's one way of looking at marriages. It's one way of looking at families. It's my way. I welcome any questions or comments. This is, and you may reach me at mercyburtonrussell@gmail.com. I look forward to any questions or comments, and I'll be back next week.